HRN listeners. As we celebrate our 15th year, we are deepening our commitment to giving voice to the next generation of food systems storytellers, and we need your help. Our internship and fellowship programs help activate new possibilities for underrepresented and underestimated young people through experiential journalism, audio engineering, and production training. Through these unique programs, HRN helps food equity stewards build essential workforce readiness skills that expand their potential and foster economic mobility. Please consider supporting these critical programs. And with a minimum donation, you can be entered to win a dinner for two at an amazing restaurant in one of 8 cities and tickets to a concert at a great venue in one of those cities. We have incredible partners across the country who have donated, as they also share our passion for helping to educate the next generation of food systems storytellers. Check out heritageradionetwork.org/15 to donate and enter to win today. That's heritageradionetwork.org/15 to donate and enter to win today. And make sure you donate before March 31st. Thank you.
You're listening to Heritage Radio Network. Since 2009, Heritage Radio Network podcasts have been exploring the wide world of food, beverage, and agriculture. Learn more at heritageradionetwork.org.
This episode is brought to you by PASA Sustainable Agriculture. Register now for PASA's 2023 conference in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, featuring more than 90 sessions on farming and food systems, as well as mixers and meetups and a trade show. Learn more at pasafarming.org/conference.
Welcome to the Grape Nation, your weekly wine journey. Our guest is Shana Clarke. We'll talk to Shana about 150 vineyards you need to visit before you die and more. I'm your host, Sam Ben-Ruby. Stay with us for the Grape Nation on the Heritage Radio Network. We bring wine to the people. Shana Clarke is a freelance writer based out of New York City, specializing in wine, sake, and travel. She has a WSET Level 3 certification and is a certified sake sommelier. Her writing has appeared in Fortune, Wine Enthusiast, Departures, and Savour, to name a few. She is also a wine marketing consultant for major wine companies at times. Shana Clarke just released her new book, 150 Vineyards You Need to Visit Before You Die. Welcome to the Grape Nation, Shana.
Thank you so much for having me.
Was that intro accurate? Did I?
Pretty much accurate.
Are you still consulting?
I do a lot of content work now, I call it. So not really doing marketing work, but content.
You're going to drive me crazy with that?
Yeah.
All right. So the people who know you obviously know you. A lot of people don't. Let's assume a lot of our listeners don't know you. So what I want to do is give everyone a little context. And I always ask people, give us a little background on your journey in life and wine that got you to the book.
Sure.
And like I said off air, start at the point where the wine thing really started happening. And from that point on, maybe not right then and there, but soon after, wine started consuming you. So where do we start?
I actually have a really very distinct starting point for you. It was probably back in, I would say, the mid-aughts. My mom had come into New York to visit. And we went
From
to dinner.
Massachusetts?
She was down in Florida
From
by
Florida.
this point.
That makes sense. Okay, right.
That's what they do.
No explanation.
So we went to Laura Fish Bar in Soho for dinner one night. And we got a bottle of wine. And, I've obviously had wine before. But for some reason, there was just something about that meal, that bottle of wine, that just something clicked. And I don't have any other better way to explain it. So much so that the next day we went back during the day, and I wanted to swing by the restaurant so I could write down the name of the wine because I was just that interested in what I had to drink. So that's really, I think, the very first starting point of when wine really kind of came on the radar for me.
So I have a few questions here, and
Sure.
usually I don't interrupt. So Laura's a great place,
Mm-hmm.
sushi, seafood centric.
Yep.
They're not known for their wine lists, but it's not the wine destination, but it's a well thought out place. Probably a lot of white. Do you remember what or how you ordered? Did you say
I
I
don't.
want to spend $40 or give me something crispy? Do you
I,
know
I
what you ordered?
I honestly don't even know what we ordered. I mean, I remember the wine exactly. It was Clelia Romano Fiano di Avellino.
Okay,
I
so it was
remember
an
that
Italian
distinctly.
white.
Italian white.
Okay.
I think we probably just said we want white wine. We want a certain price point. My guess is that's probably how the conversation.
And your wine
went.
knowledge at that point was
0,
okay.
like cranberry vodka level, like
Okay.
like nothing.
All right. So stay with me on this for a second. So what happened? What were you feeling? I mean, there was a nuance and something interesting about this wine that you didn't experience from other wines?
It was an energy, which I know is a
Good
very
word.
ambivalent kind of way to put it, but like
No, it's
it
a
just
good
it just
word.
had an energy to it. Like it was just like nothing else that I'd ever really experienced with wine before. And I think that it just probably paired really well with what we ate. And it just was a moment.
Cool.
Yeah.
So you said you went back the next day, ordered the same bottle? Or?
No, we actually just went to
Oh,
write
to
down
write
the
it down.
name of the wine. Like we kind of remember like a certain part of the name, but I didn't remember
Right.
the full name. So we
Right.
went back to just write it down on a business card.
You could think the grape is the winemaker if you don't know.
Yeah,
type
exactly.
Thing. All right, so continue.
So from there, I started taking some recreational classes at ICE.
How quickly after?
I would say probably a few months after.
Oh, pretty quick.
Yeah, pretty quick.
So that definitely set you off
It definitely
to
did.
look for classes. Jeez,
Mhm.
go ahead.
I thought it was, it'd be fun. It'd be a little wine 101, just learn something about what is this beverage. You're becoming an adult. You're always looking for your palate changes.
What were you doing? Were you doing something for a living then?
I was working in fashion. I was doing
Okay.
event marketing for a women's clothing company.
Okay, we'll talk about that for a second because you spent a decent amount of time in fashion at this company.
I was there for about 10 years.
Was it Eileen Fisher?
It was.
It was, right. I read that somewhere. All right, so while you're doing kind of a cool gig in fashion,
Mhm.
you're kind of going out to feed your thirst for
Yeah.
wine. Go ahead.
So continuing to take some recreational classes. A lot, and I took American sommelier, and then I felt like I had enough knowledge underneath. And this is like, it wasn't like a very concentrated amount of time, but it was, here and there, like a flow throughout. And then I eventually felt like I had enough of a knowledge, and I really wanted to learn more. So I took WSET level 3 back in 2011, 2012, which was intense. And I don't think I was prepared for it, but
Wait, you didn't do 1 or 2?
Nope.
You went right
Dove
to 3.
into 3.
Was that a mistake or you
I
figured
think it was
out?
great. I think it was
Okay.
fantastic. I was going to pull my hair out by the end of it, but it was a great learning experience. And back then it was also, they still incorporated spirits at that point, which I know now they've really divided things out. And I wish that I had that kind of curriculum back then. But, just to be able to taste with all these people, to be around other people that were so like-minded about learning about wine and people who wanted to talk about this in a really in-depth way. I just didn't have that community up until that point.
When you took the WSET, weren't you starting to get exposed to that community? People in the class or wanting to taste and all that?
Yep.
It's a test. Did you pass?
I passed.
Okay. All right. That was what year?
That was 2012.
Okay. So keep going.
So, and by this point, I knew that I was starting to get the idea that I was getting ready to want to move out of fashion. I mean, I was doing things where we had some big anniversary celebration for the company and all the stores, because I was working with the retail stores. All the retail stores were going to do some kind of celebratory event. I actually worked with a company out in California. I think it was probably bulk wine, whatever, but they would do private label wines. So I did this whole thing where I got all the stores, these private Eileen Fisher label wines for the ones that could serve wine. I would,
Cool idea.
every quarter, whenever they would have an event, there would be a catering manual and an event manual that I'd put together for them. And slowly the wine and the food part was getting a lot more attention than some of the other stuff.
Did you up the game?
I don't know if I
Or
upped the game because no one
Just
else
made it more prominent.
I think it just
Or more
I gave them more
regular.
ideas,
Yeah,
or
yeah,
I
yeah.
think that I was more I was more thoughtful with that section of the event manual than probably some of the others. But I could see where this was going. It was in the back of my mind. I was starting to think, I don't know if fashion is really my destiny.
So that transition was you did fashion,
Hmm.
enough of it. Let me try. Was it the old I have a career, comfortable thing, and I'm leaving that?
It was They were restructuring the company, so
Good time.
it was a good time to get out. So it made the transition really easy. So I started off thinking, not really quite sure where in the wine industry I fit. I had actually done a little bit of interviewing with some hospitality groups, but it was still kind of just more marketing events, not really wine centric. It was more wine adjacent positions. But then I had the opportunity to kind of, when I left, I said, well, where do I want to go? Where do I fit in? So I did start with the marketing with.
So don't mean to. So where do I fit in? But deep down, is there something you wanted to do? I mean, did you want to be a som in a restaurant or work at a? Were you that clear at that point, or you didn't know?
I wasn't that clear. I didn't think I wanted to be on the floor. I felt that was a skill set that I just didn't have.
Right.
So I knew that probably wasn't for me. But I knew that I liked to write. I liked marketing. I liked all of those kinds of things. So I felt anything in that realm was going to be a much better fit for me. I just didn't know exactly what that looked like. So I first started, I found it was Brooklyn Enology, which no longer exists, but it's a winery that was over in Williamsburg.
Winery?
Yep. Well, she used a custom crush facility out on Long Island, but she had a tasting room over.
So she was a winery.
Yeah. And I had seen her at some wine event before, and I thought that it was a really interesting story. Ran into them again, and at that point, I was looking for something, and they said, "Hey, why don't you come in for an interview? Maybe there's a fit." So they actually became my very first client, and I was helping out, doing some marketing for them, helping out with the tasting room. And then at that point, I'd also started dating my now husband, and he's in the wine industry as well. So there was one day I started getting a flurry of texts from him, and he's like, so-and-so can meet with you. So-and-so can meet with you. And it was just
needed help with what you could do.
Just informational interviews, just meet these women, meet these people in the industry. I think that, they might be able to give you some direction. And it was just, nice to have coffee with all of these people, just talk to them about what they were doing, what could potentially happen. And it just kind of kept going from there.
Pretty cool.
Yeah.
Kudos to your husband.
Yeah.
Not then, but now. So when is that about?
So that was probably about 2014-ish, 2015-ish.
So what do you do for the next 8-9 years? A lot of that?
Quite a bit of that. I also really started writing, freelance writing. And I started a blog when I was still in fashion, and I didn't show it to anybody, but I had a wine blog, and it taught me discipline. That was the most important thing.
Wait, the fashion blog you did, but never really put it out there?
It was a wine blog.
It was a wine blog.
It was a wine blog
while you were in fashion.
While I was still in fashion.
Did you put it out there?
I showed it to my mom.
So you knew the mechanics more than getting it exposed or whatever.
I was embarrassed. I think I was very shy, and I was very embarrassed.
But when you look back, were you right, or it wasn't so bad?
I actually haven't looked back in so long. I
don't even know. It would be fun to look at it.
It would be.
All right. So I asked you the next 8-9 years. Mm-hmm. So what else were you doing? You were doing a lot of that.
So I was doing a lot of that.
You started writing.
Mm-hmm.
Is that as simple as you start going out and contacting people and saying, here's some of my work, or do you need somebody to write? How did you get that going?
I started pitching editors. I started creating lists of publications that I wanted to write for, pitching them story ideas, just kept going with that.
Without really a body of work or stuff to show them, or a little?
It's funny because
it's good and bad news. The good news is anyone could do it.
It is.
The bad news is if you need more, then you have to have some materials to.
You need to know how to position yourself. And I took a how to pitch class. And
good for you.
And what they teach, and one thing that they teach you is you really need to show your experience. And so I figured out how to, and it's like any good salesperson, you have to sell yourself, and you have to figure out how to make yourself sound really appealing. So I could say, I did level 3 SET. I had a blog. So things like that, where it shows that you have discipline, that you have a little bit of experience, you have some knowledge. And if you can create a really tight pitch, people are going to be interested in that.
That's interesting. I mean, you had enough stuff to pitch. It's a matter of organizing it, embellishing, and, actually pitching.
Mm-hmm.
First writing gig, do you remember?
It was a wine organization site. It was a $50 per blog post thing that I did, but I became a little bit of a regular writer for them. And hey, at that point, if you're not getting paid anything ever for your writing and you're getting $50, you're like, this is great.
Yeah. What about first recognizable publication gig? Who was it and when?
It was Vine Pair.
Okay.
I don't remember the date.
About how many years ago?
It was probably 2014-ish,
it's a while
15-ish.
ago. Shows
And
you how
it
long
was-
they've been around, right?
And it was bagels and cream cheese pairings with wine.
What pairs well with that? Do you remember anything? Is it with salmon or just cream cheese?
Oh, it was everything. It was like
It was everything? So it all varied.
It all varied.
Yeah, because the salmon would do one thing that.
Yep. I think I probably did like salmon and Riesling or something like that.
Good one. I assume you continued to write a few more things for them?
Yep. Worked with them for a while and then just kept growing the roster of publications I worked with.
Nice. So obviously you did that for years. Were you doing other stuff, consulting and content writing?
All of that, yep.
So I guess we're getting close to the point where we're going to talk about your book. Not yet, but you get contacted?
I do. So
tell me that story.
I got contacted at the end of 2021. I got an email.
During the pandemic.
During the pandemic. And I thought it was a spam email at first. I read this thing 5 times.
You don't have enough confidence in yourself.
Well, because I was reading through, I'm like, no, this sounds ridiculous. Because it was a very detailed email, but then they also said that they wanted writing samples. And I don't write for free. I don't think anybody should ever write for free. So I thought
including a sample?
Nope, shouldn't write for free.
Really? Good for you. You're like the Apple of wine writing.
Well, I can tell you how I worked around this, what I proposed to them. But you see something
and they're like. Do you think it was a form letter or it was?
I think it was probably I'd wonder if they'd sent it to like maybe 2 or 3, or it was just kind of the background. But it seemed pretty detailed and pretty personal. So they said, we want some writing samples, blah blah. Can we have a meeting? So. And after reading it like several times, I'm like, no, this actually does sound probably pretty legit.
A meeting request in the initial letter?
Yeah.
Okay.
If this sounds interesting, like we'd love to chat with you. So we did a Zoom with them. And they were legit. They were lovely. And we had long conversations about what they were looking for. And obviously I had my thoughts about the book. I can tell you that I know it's called 150 Vineyards, but we did have quite a long discussion about, is vineyards actually the right word for what this book is supposed to be? Because to me, if you say vineyards, you're going to end up with a lot of stories about dirt. And I just didn't want it to be, here's the soil.
You're right,
and
but
here's
it's pretty broad.
It can be broad. So then we played around with, they didn't like the idea of winery. Estate wasn't really quite a good fit either. Like we couldn't quite figure it out. We went back and forth, and finally they said, we really like vineyards. We think it's a very romantic term, and which I do agree with. And they said, as you write this, I think you're going to see that it's not going to really be about dirt. Like we wanted to have a travel element to it. We wanted to have a little bit of this other kind of element. So we want to be inspirational. So vineyards in the end felt like the right thing.
I didn't think anything other than what you're describing. I would think vineyards would talk about place, wine, the people behind them, where they are, the region, so it wasn't, I think that worked. It's a good thing that you stayed with that. But like I said, I want to talk about a few other things and then we'll get into the book.
Sure.
So now that the book is done, what are you doing? What are you working on? Do you have pieces going into publications? Are you pitching business?
Both. I'm working on a few articles. I've been pitching editors quite a bit more now because I worked on this book for a good chunk of 2022, and by the end, my brain was kind of fried. So I just didn't have it totally in me to do as much pitching as I wanted to, but I kind of feel like now I have clear air. So get my ideas together. I'm pitching a lot more. I'm looking for more content clients again, trying to get more content work back in gear. So all of that.
What do you have wish lists? Like, I would think you do. I'm curious what the answer is. I want to write about this. I'm curious about that. I want to go visit here. Everything involves time, money, if you can get compensated. But what's on your radar or what's on your wish list?
Do you want to pick one and we can drill down from there? Because there's a lot. I mean, there's so many places I'd love to see. There's so many publications I'd love to write for. There's so many things I'd love to
do. Places.
Okay. Places. I would love to see Greece. I've never seen Santorini or Greece or anything.
Greece for the wine,
Greece
not
for
just
the wine.
for a
Yeah.
chill vacation.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, these are all like wine because a lot of my travel always kind of goes around with wine. I'm not one of those, let's go lay on a beach somewhere. It doesn't appeal to me, really. I want to go somewhere and see certain
stuff,
things.
right.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
I've been hearing a lot of really interesting things about Chile and like the Chilean, some of the smaller producers that are happening down there. And I really am very curious about that.
Huge natural wine scene, small producers bringing indigenous grapes back. That's a good call. Give me one more.
Canary Islands.
Which is established, but there's some great stuff.
Some interesting things.
Yeah. There's some good people making good wines. Now, what about, I don't know if this was a question I initially meant to ask, but you sort of led me to it. Is there anyone you want to write for? It's like, I got to get, I'll do anything to get here. What is that?
I like Bon Appetit's voice. I think that they do some really interesting stories, and I think that if I could find the right thing, that would be a great place. I think the New York Times is always one that, Eric's,
he was on last week.
Right. So wine is going to be quite tough to get into because, that's his beat. So,
they push stuff off of him to other things.
Okay.
The thing about Bon Appetit and Food and Wine is they just don't cover a lot of wine.
Mm-hmm.
They'll do an issue where they devote time, but there's just not a lot of, it's food, and a little wine.
Mm-hmm.
It's Bon Appetit again, and here's some wine. That it fares well they do it, but I'm saying they don't do enough. Well, hopefully that'll happen. All right, so before we get into the book and before we take a break, I want to segue by asking you, I always believed, and from this show, that wine became more than a liquid in a glass.
Mm-hmm.
I was saying off air that when I started the show, who's the most famous guy I can get, or, whatever. It kind of morphed into the story and, wine beyond the liquid in the glass. You said, as you were writing the book, you said the wine world is so much more than just well-known names and sites,
mm-hmm.
which plays into what I'm saying. It's just not the big thing. It could be a generational thing, like in Germany, growing grapes on the hillside, which is, a story in its own. And you said wine is produced in all kinds of surprising places. So I'm guessing, and I want you to expand on this, for you, it was about the story too.
Mm-hmm.
We talked a little that it's beyond the vineyard, and even titling the book, it's really the story.
Right.
So did you fall into that, or that's the direction it went? Tell me a little about your process there.
And the entries in the book are fairly short, and it's one of those, the iceberg analogy that everybody uses, because it's like this itty bitty little, like nothing. And there's all this underneath each entry. And so what do you actually focus on? Like what's the most interesting part of it? And it's not even the most interesting part, but what's the one little thing that you're going to pull out for this? And that was, I think, one of the biggest frustrations with the book, is because each entry, there is so much to each one. So how do you identify and why decide to pick this thing to focus on? Because any of those entries could have gone 10 different ways.
Yeah. And, we'll talk about how the book is set up and people will understand why. All right, we're going to take a quick break. I'm talking to Shana Clarke. Shana just wrote a book called 150 Vineyards You Need to Visit Before You Die. When we come back, we're going to talk about that and everything that went into doing that. You're listening to The Grape Nation on the Heritage Radio Network. We'll be right back.
Cultivate farms and food systems that nourish, heal, and empower. Register now for PASA Sustainable Agriculture's 2023 conference. Access more than 90 sessions on topics including environmental conservation, food justice, sustainable food and textile production, renewable energy, and much more. Featuring a not-to-be-missed lineup of speakers, including Indigenous environmental scientist and author of Fresh Banana Leaves, Jessica Hernandez, the best-selling author of The Art of Fermentation, Sandra Katz, co-owners of heritage seed company True Love Seeds, Owen Taylor and Chris Bolden Newsome, and many more. PASA's conference takes place in Lancaster, Pennsylvania on February 8th through 11th, and includes social networking events plus an expansive trade show. Register now at pasafarming.org/conference. That's PASA farming.org/conference.
All right, we're back. We're back with my guest, Shana Clarke. Shana is fresh off writing. Is this your first book?
My first full book, I contributed a chapter to the Wine Lover's Bucket List previously. I did the North America section, but this is my first full book.
Good way to answer the question. First full book. All right, so let's talk about the book. 150 vineyards you need to visit before you die. I think we talked a little about when and how the book came about. They reached out to you.
They reached out to me.
I think off air we talked a little about that. Tell me a little more about that.
Yeah, so as I think I was mentioning earlier, I got this email and I just didn't believe that it was legit. Like I said, because they were asking for free writing samples, which, whatever. But the more I read it, the more I realized that this is an actual offer. I was Googling them, looking at their work.
Right. I mean, that's the
obvious thing to do.
The publisher's Lanu, LANOO. Okay, so you do a little research. They're legit.
Yep. And so I thought, this could be a really interesting project. So we had a Zoom call to talk it over.
Was it you and one other person or a few other people?
It was two people. It was became my direct editor and the publisher as well.
Okay.
And they were lovely. They were just so great to chat with. I could tell that we would have a really good working relationship if we forged, because I think that that's really important. We want to talk to each other about the vision of how this would go, because this was their first foray into anything that was wine. And so it came out of it, and I thought, this could definitely be a great project. So I submitted, what I offered to them when they said free writing samples is I actually said, well, why don't we do it this way?
Say why that it was an issue, because you're not submitting material for free, you told me.
I'm not,
even on a pitch thing, which, I was a little surprised. So what did you do?
So what I did is I said, I will write you these 3 entries and for this fee. And if you guys like this and if we proceed, you can apply that fee towards, my fee with the book. Or, and so that was what I proposed. We ended up finding I ended up sending them some older writing samples of things that I had done, because that's just how it ended up going.
Why? Because they pushed back? We're not paying you to do.
Well, I think that they were just being mindful of budget. And so I think that this was an alternative solution. I think that met a middle ground, if I just sent them some previous samples. I think they had in their mind that they knew that I was going to be the person for this, and especially after the call. So it seemed that it was going to be.
Solidified it.
Yeah, exactly.
So you send them the sample pretty quickly. They get back pretty quickly. They go, this is what we want to do. Did the letter have enough detailed explanation of what the book was and what you wanted to do? Or it was pretty clear? It
was pretty clear what they were asking.
Okay.
And then it became, but also once we had the post conversations, then it became, there were a few other things that they wanted. We want to make sure that this does have this inspirational, aspirational element to it. We want to have a little bit of a travel feel to it, so again, to kind of keep it feeling a little bit diverse. So then we kind of just went a little bit more into the nuts and bolts and more of the feeling too about how we wanted this book to look at the end.
Was there anything they wanted that conflicted with what you wanted to do, or you guys were all on the same page?
It didn't conflict, but they had a very interesting request for me. Because of where they're based, they asked if I could find vineyards in Belgium and the Netherlands to include, which kind of, I was like...
Self-serving in a good way.
It's self-serving.
Let's clarify that they're a publisher based in Belgium, so... Right,
exactly.
Not going through all the trouble, you might as well.
But
what'd you come up with, Heineken?
No, I the thing is, and that's where a lot of things changed for me, because I really had never. I had a feeling there were wine like a few wineries out there, but it's not over here. At least we don't hear that much about a wine culture over there.
No.
So it got me thinking differently about what I wanted to select, because if we're doing things that are in places that are going to surprise people, I think that that's a really interesting way to take the book. Why it shouldn't be just these grand. Everyone knows who they are. It shouldn't be that way.
I'll talk to you a little more about that.
Yeah.
So that request to help promote, their homeland enlightened you to a really legitimate direction,
Yeah.
which is pretty cool. When they contacted you, what was that, in 2021?
2021.
When? Middle, end of the year?
Towards the end of the year.
Okay. And the letters and the submission of the work and the Zoom meeting right after you're on it?
Yeah.
You literally start?
It started pretty quickly, and then we had a little bit of back and forth just with the contract. So that took a couple, 6 weeks or so.
Okay. Oh, you sound tough. So now you're at the desk with your pencil or your computer. Wire to wire. Don't tell me the details. How long did it take to pretty much put the book together?
Oh, God. Well, I had they initially wanted April deadline, which I just thought was absolutely impossible. So I said May 31st is the deadline to get.
April? You're talking end of the year? And
No. We officially, I guess you could say officially got started, contract done, whatever, January. And I had to get the manuscript in May 31st. And they initially asked for April. I couldn't see that actually happening. So we were able to do May.
Wow.
It was
crazy.
Intense.
So I didn't, I pretty much read everything, pondered over the front, the index and everything. It is 150 vineyards. Are there less or more?
150, exactly.
It clocks in at 150. All right. So let's start with getting the elephant in the room out of the way.
Okay.
All right. The obvious question is, did you visit these 150 vineyards?
No, I did not.
Okay. So let's drill down a little. Did you visit any?
Yes.
Did you visit places because of the book?
No, I did not visit places because of the book. I pulled a lot of inspiration from previous experiences.
Okay, give me an example.
For the book.
You could be specific.
Quite a number of the California ones I'd visited. I knew that there's something really beautiful and special going on over there. But then you're going to have ones like I included somewhere from Thailand. Like I didn't get a chance to go to Thailand. I hope one day to visit them out there. But
that's
there's certain
the
ones
Belgian
that are
thing. Like, let me look at places that you wouldn't.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
One of the things I noticed, and tell me if this was sort of a theme or an interest. To me, it looked like a lot of the vineyards were not necessarily these large mega vineyards. I really looked to find names. I'm looking in California and is like Phelps or Camus going to pop up? None of that really anywhere. They seem like mostly they're family vineyards, and there seems like there's a story. So is that accurate? And was that a criteria? Like, I'm more interested in these places?
It wasn't a criteria, but I think it speaks to a lot of where my interests are. I wanted to get a lot of these voices in, or at least attempt to get some voices in that I think may not normally get a format like this. Because I think with a lot of other places, you're doing these lists of the best, and some of these family-run places are not going to make that cut.
Right. That's reality. I mean, there's enough other places as far as all of that. Was there a process? I mean, did you really check down things? I mean, that was one of them, but how did you, because you didn't visit, which I didn't think you would or could. What was the process? I mean, did you have like Post-its on your wall? How'd you go about this?
Spreadsheets are my best friend.
Okay.
It was a long process. It was challenging. I would wake up in the middle of the night with an idea and jot it down into my phone and then add it in. One of the criteria that the publishers needed is they needed good photography. So I actually had reached out to more than 150. I was probably reached out closer to like 200-ish wineries, because there were some that they just didn't have the photography. They just didn't have what the publisher was going to need for inclusion. Some of them also just flat out said they just weren't interested in being included, and that's totally valid too. But when you know that you need good photography, that does kind of change some of the selections as well.
So most of I mean, the book is very photographic. It's beautiful in that sense. Most of the photographs were provided by the vineyards.
Most were, a couple were from my very good friend Kevin Day, who's a very talented photographer. So
Had
he had some
stuff
that,
from traveling.
yeah.
Um, were you happy or frustrated? Were they able to send you, good photography?
Most places have good photography. There was very few that did not actually. I think
Right.
in this day and age, everybody has
For internal
photography.
stuff, their website,
Yeah.
even whatever else.
Yeah.
So you spoke, or you considered over 150, you said.
No, yeah.
Was that for the obvious reasons? There's a percentage that's going to say, no, I gotta.
It was, it was, and some of it was on a rolling basis where I realized, because we also were trying to find a good balance to make sure that the book felt quite global, because it is very easy to go very heavy into certain regions than others.
We're going to talk about that. Most of the vineyards, I would say, or I'm asking you what percentage. There seems like an aspect to me of thoughtful farming, thoughtful winemaking. It doesn't get labeled as natural wine or whatever, but there's an eye towards sustainability, a love of the land, not making these doctored wines. Is that correct? I mean, when you look at the 150 vineyards, is a big chunk of them that type of winery?
I think so. And I did try to call that out. I mean, I couldn't make a whole book of why they're important is because they farm sustainably, but
right. And we're going to talk about the format, because
Yeah.
the format is, and I wanted to set it up to talk about that.
Sure.
But that's basically who you wanted to cover, who you were attracted to.
It is. I feel it's really important. And I think that I wanted, again, this was an opportunity to highlight that, even if it isn't kind of in a quieter way. But I think that I wanted that through line in the book. I wanted those kinds of wineries there.
I was hoping you'd say that.
Yes.
Because it was obvious to me, and a thought was put towards that. You succeeded in that sense.
I'm glad you saw that.
Yeah. Because a lot of, and as I said earlier, family or smaller wineries, that's kind of what they care about or whatever. Tell me this. So you and I bump into each other in an elevator, and I say, "What are you doing?" You say, "I just wrote a book." Well, what's it called? 150 vineyards, you need to visit before you die. And I look at you and we talk a little, and then I ask you the elevator pitch question. Who are you, or what qualifies you to be the person that selects these vineyards, and how do I know, that it's not influenced by something or whatever? What do you say to that? Now, you gave me a little that, a lot of it is thoughtful, sustainable, so that was, but tell me what qualifies you to do that. We've also talked about your body of work. Tell me a little more.
I would say because I'm curious, because I'm always exploring, because I think that there's important messages that need to be told that may not get the opportunity to be told. I would like to think that I'm a good writer, that I can hopefully convey these stories.
Well, I'm not challenging that, because you were selected by a publisher and you have a body of work. But now you're the guy at the table selecting this. So let's drill down a little. So I noticed that you talk to a lot of smaller entities, and a lot of them were thoughtful producers. You mentioned curiosity. I think curiosity makes it a global thing. So you went all over the place. It's like, let me look in Thailand. So you expanded this more, because you and I know that you could probably fill 2/3 of the book with the Loire or something.
Right.
But that's not what it's all about. Do you think you hit that challenge?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. But 150 is such a small amount. And so there are I look back
It's a
and I
lot,
think
and it's not a lot.
exactly.
I mean, you got to get 150, and then you realize, how much more. I mean, like we said, the Loire, probably you could do half of that. Um, it's interesting. That's part of the challenge and the fun with you. All right. So in the book, I think you cover 6 continents.
Yes.
There's no
Not
wine
no
in
one
the
in Antarctica.
Antarctica, right? You cover 6 continents. I casually counted 30 countries. And we know, like, take Italy or France or even the US, there's multiple regions.
Yeah.
So you covered that. So we talked about global. Global was one of your goals. Your
Mm-hmm.
curiosity, set you out. So were there any places that you either stumbled on or you were determined to represent?
I was. It's a good question. I was determined to represent. I really want to make sure that Japan was represented.
Becoming a hot wine market.
It's a really interesting place. I was there back in 2019. I've been there twice, and in 2019 was really wine focused, and it's just really interesting what's happening there. And I think that I wanted that shown. I think what's happening in Scandinavia is interesting as well. For better or for worse, I think that's just showing the effects of climate change.
Right.
And so
England's making sparkling wine
Yep.
for climate change reasons.
Mm-hmm.
You don't really get into any dissertation about climate change.
No.
But like you just said, it affects, like Scandinavia may not have been a topic 10 years ago.
Right.
Or whatever, or you wouldn't even mention English sparkling wine.
Exactly.
But that changed everything. So you were able to cover, was there anything you think you left out?
I think
After you close the book,
yes and no, because then you think about, well, in Italy, I mean, it was definitely, there was Tuscany, there was Piedmont, there was all those, but you look at something like Italy where there's wine made all over, and there's so many different regions that you're just not even touching within one country. So then you feel, well, did I just shine too much of a light on the regions that everybody already knows? Should I have maybe changed out the balance? But again, it's that push pull of, well, people know Tuscany, so you want to make sure that you do have Tuscan producers in there. And if you're talking Tuscany, then we're also talking, we're doing, Montalcino, we're doing Bulgari, so it just gets
Chianti,
the whole thing.
Tuscans,
Yeah.
That's a tough challenge.
Yeah.
And that's a good example because it's a highly popular region. They're making a lot of different wines. And you could spend a good amount on it, but who wants to do that? The book has, and now we can get into, the book has a format in a sense. And I'll set it up and then you'll drill it down a little. There's basically 1 page for each winery. I mean, it's a thick book. So there's 150 vineyards. It's wrapped with photos. Some the photos on the 1 page, some there's a couple of pages of photos. But when you get to the page, and it's broken down by continent, country, and all that, explain to me the things you discuss. And it's the same, I'm correct, on each page?
Yeah.
So what is it and how did you come to that? Because again, there's probably a lot of other things, right?
Right.
So I get to pick something. Pick a vineyard, and let's talk about the page.
Okay, I think it was. Here's an example one let's do Vic Winery. Let's do that.
Okay,
one.
Where is that?
That one, South America, and I'm sorry for blanking all of a sudden. But so with that one was meant to be. That one I think is a good example of one of the ones that was meant to be more of a tourism experience because they have supposed to have a really beautiful estate, and they do. There's cooking, there's a place to stay, and it's not even so much about the vineyard itself, but it's about this holistic experience when you get there. That's what they even call it, Vic Holistic Winery. So that's just one example. So to me, that's going to kind of take the center stage for that. It's really about the experience, that travel kind of experience that you're going to be getting when you're there.
So you have to figure out the angle for each vineyard, and for that one, it was more about the whole experience than. But then there are things like you ask a question I forgot. I mean, what's that little notation in the left corner? What do you?
Oh, the reason to visit.
Reason to
Right,
visit.
right.
Right. Every winery has a reason to visit.
Correct.
And every reason varies. It's not
Exactly.
always about the wine. Try their Cabernet.
No.
So you have the description, the reason to visit, photos. What else is?
There's the general listings of it. There's the website address for anyone
Right.
who wants to visit.
Right.
But there were some actually that, like Bechtold Vineyard.
Where's that?
That's in Lodi. So that it's one of the oldest Cinsault vineyards, possibly the world, definitely in America. But there's no actual address for it, so we kind of had to do this intersection of this street and this street.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Where'd you say, Lodi?
I think it's Lodi.
Yeah, Lodi has a lot of old vines, sandlands. All those guys are growing, head trained old, vines. It's pretty cool. People don't know enough about it. Is it obvious which country has the most entries?
No,
I counted. I know the answer.
I actually don't know the answer.
It's France.
Is it?
Yeah. 30 plus. And then I think Italy was next, and then the US, which plays to that they're there, right? What's curious is you don't even know.
Yeah.
Why? Because it doesn't seem like.
Yeah, I think because there was also just going through the process and editing and taking this one in and moving this one here, giving more focus to this. And so I think that I just kind of lost track after a while.
That's interesting. Which regions and vineyards, after doing this, and I think when you said Japan, are not getting the attention they should be getting to this day? You mentioned two things, and I want you, I'll set you up. I think Chile, there's a whole movement down there. And I think Japan, you're going to see, Alice Firing was in here not that long ago. And I said, where do you want to go? And she said, Japan it's crazy what's going on there. So there's something going on. Anything that plays into that, vein, other
ones that don't get enough attention.
Yeah. I mean, in the context of the book, it's like I wrote about this because they didn't get attention, or I didn't get a chance because I didn't have room. I mean, what comes to mind?
Probably have to look at the book to see where I weighed, but I know that, I think I could have done a lot more with Australia because Australia is huge. And I think that, I wasn't able to cover as much of Australia as I would have liked to have covered.
Yeah, because there's tons of regions, and within like Victoria or whatever has tons of wineries. That's a good example.
Yeah.
Because it's very well known. I also think you may have been swayed by the fact that, maybe it's not as popular or in vogue as other regions, even though they make terrific wines. I mean, what I just said is silly, but all right. So I have kids. I don't know if you do. You'll tell me in a second. But this is the quintessential, if you had to pick your favorite kid question, like I have 3 boys. Can't answer that. But if I had to, I don't know, a gun to my head. After doing this book, you have to walk away with a thinking about, God, this is cool, or this is memorable, or, I love this because of doing the book. Anything come up? If you had to pick, the real question is the 150 vineyards, what's the one that, resonates the most with you? You don't have to answer, but answer it any way you want.
Don't have kids that I can answer that one. That's easy.
All right. So now you have, I brought the challenge to the table anyway.
I don't know. I think that working on the book has piqued my interest in certain places to visit. Like I've already talked about, Scandinavia. There's that change that's happening. England, same kind of thing. That change that's happening. But I would like to dig into Argentina more. I don't think that I really have a great grasp on what's going on in Argentina. I'd like to see what's happening there. I think.
But also, in that context, when people think of Argentina, there's a lot of Malbec producers, and they're starting to do a lot of other stuff. Are you looking at the Argentina beyond Malbec, or you're just happy to even get up to speed with that?
I would like to go beyond. I would be
Right.
very interested to see that.
Okay.
The other thing that the book did, though, is surprisingly, it did get me to think about classic regions a little bit more that I think that I previously just kind of overlooked. And this kind of feeds into a little bit about what I've been drinking a little bit more, but I didn't pay that much attention to Bordeaux prior, but I'm now really interested in what's going on in Bordeaux. I don't really drink Napa cabs that much, but now I'm really kind of curious about going back to some of these things that I think I previously thought, they've had so much coverage, or they're just so well established. What can I contribute to this conversation? But then I realized by doing that, I'm glossing over a good portion of my own personal knowledge. So now those are two areas that I think I'm starting to just explore more.
But don't you think Napa and Bordeaux, which have been very established, they're the big Cabernet makers in the world, don't you think one of the reasons they have your interest is because they're doing different things? Like Napa is starting to make more restrained wines. They're starting to plant different grapes.
Mm-hmm.
Bordeaux, I mean, there were always a zillion vineyards there, but a lot of these small ones are interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I think Ponte Canet is biodynamic. I mean, there's stories maybe people never knew. I mean, isn't that,
Mm-hmm.
that's the stuff that's interesting and worth reporting on, right?
Right. But it's also just, I think, that base education level, that basic knowledge that I think you kind of think, I know this, I don't need to worry too much about this. But,
Right.
but at the same time, it's worth looking into, and it's worth really making sure that you have a really strong foundation and a strong knowledge. I mean, they are very well-known wines and wineries for a reason. So why
Right.
is that?
So earlier when I said what type of stuff as a writer you want to work on, I mean, getting
Mm-hmm.
deeper into Bordeaux or Napa is certainly something interesting to you.
It's something interesting to me. But to your point, exactly, because there is also, so you take that base knowledge and then you can talk about what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, that's what's
Yeah.
compelling and interesting
Right.
to me. I think people are based on the base knowledge, and some that's it, and others are like, wait, I'm hearing stuff, tell me about it, which is pretty cool. I think it was in the intro or whatever, you talk about great vineyards. So in the end,
Mm-hmm.
before we wrap up and do our wine list, what makes a great vineyard? What makes a great vineyard post writing this book? By writing the book, you came across certain tangible things that kept coming up.
Mm-hmm. I think what makes a great vineyard, I think the people behind it really make a great vineyard. The people who are being thoughtful about their farming, the people who are being really thoughtful about what they're planting, how they're taking this land and paying respect to it. I think and then the stories from these people, the family connections that they potentially have with this land. I think that it's really the people that makes a great vineyard.
So we were talking, did we talk on air? I've been sitting here so long. Did we talk on air or off air about the title of the book, Vineyards? Like you were, that may have been off air, that you weren't sure if 150 vineyards was vineyard the right, it could have been winery or a place or whatever.
Yeah.
And I think what you just said, that vineyards in reality are people.
Yeah.
And that's definitely what makes a great vineyard, the people.
Yeah.
And how they approach it. What else? Anything else can you think of? Were there any threads that weaved in and out of?
I think it was, you could just talk about general terroir, just where they are in place. But I think a great vineyard also signifies something about the region. It's telling a different story too, or it's grounding a place. For better, I don't know if that's really the right way to say it.
Well,
but
try to set it up in an example. What do you mean by that?
So,
do your best.
I think, all right, maybe we'll talk about Ponte Canet, because I think that's a really great example. So they are quintessential classic Bordeaux. So I think that they, with their biodynamic practices, with the changes that they are trying to make, I think that they are telling a story about Bordeaux in two different ways. They're telling that classic Bordeaux story, but they're also telling about the future of Bordeaux.
That's a good way to put it. I think Roederer is doing that. Cristal, all their other champagnes, they're a biodynamic house. They're a house champagne. They're not huge, but they're not small. They're not a grower. So yeah, I think getting that story out there is important. All right, so the book is 150 vineyards to visit before you die. Shana will tell us at the end of the show the best places to get it. Um, Quickly about the publisher. We talked about how they got to you. They're called Lannoo, Lannoo. They do other books, 150 bars to visit before you die. They pulled the golf cart in. I saw, not golf cart, golf card. They did a book on golf. Um, why were they interested in wine? It was just time.
I think it was just time. Yeah.
They thought it was.
Yeah.
And like you said, they're based out of the Netherlands, Belgium.
Belgium.
Okay. And they make coffee table books, all that. This is not a coffee table book.
No.
But it's a substantial book. All right. So we'll tell people where to get the book in a minute. Let's do our wine list. I think you cheated and looked at everything, and probably the spontaneity of this is the most fun. But the reason I do this is it's really fun to turn our listeners on to great suggestions from people from all walks of life. It's just as fun to hear what Eric Asimov has to say. And then you, after doing this book, I'm just curious, put a little more pressure on you. All right. So first question is, what are you drinking now? What's in your fridge? What are you tasting? What's interesting to you? Do you change for the seasons?
Sure.
What's out there?
I think you probably get this from all guests, but I drink pretty broadly. So it depends on what I'm in the mood for. I think salty whites are always kind of a go-to.
You like whites with that salinity?
I love that salinity.
What does that point to? Anywhere? Is that like Muscadet or Italian coastal wine? I mean, what?
A lot of volcanic ones.
Okay.
Volcanic wines. Do love Riesling. Always will love Riesling. Like I said, recently I've been kind of digging into things that I don't really understand, such as Cabernet, because why not? Always good to learn.
To this day, you have not drank a ton of Cabernet?
Correct.
Okay. That's interesting. So
lighter reds, Italian. I mean, it's really just kind of what's.
But let's recap for a second. Salty whites, Riesling, exploring Cabernet. Those are all good answers. We'll post those. All right, this is the goofiest question on the list, and I don't know why I leave it on. I've threatened myself to take it off this year, but it's the second show and I haven't done crap. So, favorite wine and food pairing, not what you think is, but what you like.
I don't pair.
It's 2 weeks in a row. That's what Asimov said. He says, I don't care about pairing, but I did get him to say every New Year's he makes lasagna and Chianti Classico. So there's a pairing.
That's a pairing. As long as it's not going to be like Amarone with like cod. Like, I mean, as long as they're not going to like cancel each other out. It's like, what am I in the mood to drink tonight? And what am I hungry for? Or what is my husband cooking? Because I don't cook. So it's, it's just as long as we have things like just what are we hungry for?
Care about
what do
pairing,
we want?
You care about complementing each thing. But you're not into the pairing setup. Like you're not the Pinot Noir roast chicken guy.
I think it
doesn't matter.
It gets people too much into their own heads, and I think it frightens people that I'm doing this wrong, or oh God, like how can I pair this with it? I think it's a really intimidating thing for people to try to figure out, and I think that it's I think it can be a barrier for people.
I think we program people. This is what you eat with that.
Yeah.
And somebody said you could drink red wine with salmon. Screw that. So I think it's more playing to people and their curiosities, but I think more and more people are saying. But let me ask you a question. So you said before you came on the show, you did a little research. You knew there was going to be the wine list.
Yep.
That's the answer you prepared?
Yeah.
No answer? That's where you're going?
I stand by my no answer.
I just want to make sure you didn't forget anything or something. No. All right? All right. You live in the city.
Yep.
The village.
Lower East Side.
Lower East Side, not the village, Lower East Side. You've been in New York how long?
22 years.
Okay, so you're in New York. Favorite wine restaurants and or bars? Places that selection that plays to you. People you can talk to. Vibe.
Got it. I'm in the Lower East Side, which is amazing for
pretty
places.
good stuff there.
My all-time favorite is Somtime on Broome Street.
I don't know if anybody has ever brought that up.
Sondheim
Crazy.
is this. It is like a hidden gem, and I almost
Wait, so Sondheim on Broome Street,
Yes.
how far east?
It's between Ludlow and Orchard.
Okay, so it's
So-
the Lower East Side.
Yeah, just
Okay.
south of
I didn't know
Delancey.
Broome even went that far.
Yeah.
Okay, SOMM
Yep.
time.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Any food or just?
Yep, they have food too. So the owner is Maria Rust, and her wife Angie is the chef. Maria has
Very cool.
best by the glass selection. Seriously, she's rotating it all the time. Lots of interesting stuff to try. Her bottle list is bonkers, and I never even get to the bottles because I'm always just working my way through the by the glass. But the vibe is great. It's a neighborhood bar. Elevated, I guess, is the best way to put it. Like, it's super comfortable. There's always that regular cast of regulars that are in there all the
It
time.
sounds like perfect for a neighborhood.
But you get like a lot of wine industry people there. It's just an
I
awesome
can't
place.
believe, to my recollection, it hasn't come up or not for a long time.
Yeah.
I mean, you and I can sit here and guess the 5 places that are, Four Horsemen or whatever places.
Mhm.
All right, so that's a great one. That's why I asked these questions.
Yep.
Give me more.
Parcel, which opened up
Fairly new.
fairly new.
What do you like about that?
Great bottle list. I like the fact that I can sit outside in the summer with a picnic table and my Zalto. They'll give you Zaltos.
They give you Zaltos?
They give you Zaltos.
Okay.
And just
Zalto is a very well-made, fancy glass, but very durable
Yep.
and makes a difference. All right. Keep going.
across the street from Parcel is La Dive. Kind of a very Parisian bistro feel. Great steak tartare, great artichoke, steamed artichoke, which you don't think artichoke with wine, but you
Right.
will find stuff to
And
pair
the
with
wine
that.
list?
Wine list is
it French-centric?
it's pretty French centric. It's very low intervention leaning. So
Okay. So they
smaller
definitely have a
producers,
theme there
yeah.
and all of that.
exactly.
Give me one more.
Who else do I really like?
And think about, maybe you can't, but think about out of the neighborhood, like in the city, like you're in the West Village or Midtown. Does anything come up?
I'm trying
Tribeca?
to. I just went to Chambers recently, past Lane's place, which was great. Had some snacks and some stuff by the glass with a colleague of mine, which was really lovely. The space is really pretty, very
Yeah.
elegant.
That's a place that comes up a lot.
Mhm.
That's why when I heard your choices, it's
Yeah.
cool. I don't know if anyone's been to Lay Down. I'm surprised you didn't say Gem, which is, it's a good place.
I haven't been yet.
You
so
don't
I'm-
have to say it. I'm just,
Yep.
these are your sensibilities seem like similar places
Sure.
would come up on the list.
I have a
think that-
reservation for next week, so
All right,
I'll
those are-
report back.
Those are all good ones. And like I said, I post them, in the
Okay.
upcoming week, we'll post everything. All right. 4th question. The question is, what's Shana's favorite all-time wine? When I initially, and this podcast is going way more than 5 years strong. When I initially structured the question, I wanted to hear Aldo Sohm tell me the most expensive rare wine he tasted. That's how I wanted him to answer the question.
Uh-huh.
As you and I talked about for an hour, wine is about the story.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm interested in the wine that had the most influence on you, that was a gateway, that was memorable, that did something for you. Could
Okay.
be one or two. Do you have a wine like that? Can you think back?
I mean, if we're going to talk gateway, it would definitely be that Clelio Romano Fiano. Like that
Okay,
would
with-
definitely be that
at Laura
gateway.
Fish Bar.
Yeah, that
That's
would be the
sort
gateway.
of, that's really the designed answer,
Mhm.
because that checks all the boxes. All right, so give me one other thing that you could think of like that. Okay.
Champagne, just hand me a glass of champagne, and I'm very happy.
Okay. So your favorite all-time wine? You kind of screwed the question up. The first answer was perfect. The
Now
second
I'm
one,
fired.
sort of. I may abruptly get up and walk out. Armin, cut this down. No, it wasn't like, what's your favorite wine or what do you like
Yeah.
now? I'm gonna put champagne and what are you drinking now then? Right? I mean, it's something you. It's fine. You gave me a good answer. I don't want to make you feel guilty or walking out of here feeling shitty or whatever. Okay. All right. You should be able to handle this. I always ask my guests, recommend to me the best wine around 15, 20, 22 bucks. Try to give me a red, try to give me a white. You can go category. Like I always say Muscadet because It's great value. There are some great makers. It plays into your salinity thing.
Mm-hmm.
I always say my kids are, they're in their late 20s. They can't show up at a party with supermarket wine, but they can't afford $50 either. So how do you wow at 20?
Right.
What comes to your mind?
See, this is the one that was. I know I should have been
Oh,
spontaneous.
so you're unprepared?
Well, I've been struggling with this one, I will say.
All right, so let's think of me as your wine therapist. I will help you get it out of you, okay? I will.
Well, because I think that every region you're going to find something that fits that description. Anywhere you go, there's gonna be something that works. It's a matter of finding someone to help guide you there. I know that. So I used to.
I like that answer.
Okay.
All right, I like that answer because probably in most regions, there's a value to the region, or like in France, like Muscadet is generally, Eric Asimov last week, he answered the question very broadly and said, just go into a really good wine store. The guy's there to turn you on and ask him, I got $18. I like this kind of red,
Yeah.
But you took it to another direction, which is every region has value. So pick your region, look for the value.
Yeah.
How else can you answer that? You got any specifics?
If you do want to get specifics, I do think that South African Chenin Blanc is
Great.
There's a lot of really interesting stuff happening down there, and I think South Africa overall has some great values.
That is a perfect answer. Because, no, really, it's a region that deserves attention. There's some great winemakers. It's not expensive yet. There's, some nuance to some of the wines because of locations and all that. That's great. So that's white. I'm going to force you to think a red.
Can I go back to my...
Red is tough for everyone.
See, red is really hard.
It tends to be a little more expensive.
And again, it's like,
let's
what
think
do you...
together.
Well,
Remember, I'm your wine therapist.
How come Eric can get away with saying go to your wine shop, and I'm going through the rigor here?
Because he's Eric Asimov. I'm not even Eric Asimov. I have the pleasure of having him on. You ain't getting out of here until we work a red out.
God. All right.
Let's think about the book. I mean,
No.
you know what? I'm not going to let you use this answer, but I'm going to give it to you as an example. The Chilean reds by these small producers with some of the indigenous grapes, literally. I had Isabel Leger on from Raw Wine. I interviewed her. We opened up a wine. It was a Chilean red from Maule, Maule.
Mm-hmm.
I said, how much is it? She goes, $18. It's crazy. All right. So
all right, I got one for you.
dig deep.
All right, let's do something Portugal, Douro.
Perfect. Now, I traveled to the Douro, took the kids there years ago. There's great value. I think like everywhere, it's climbing up a little. But to your recollection, there's still good Douro wines for 18, 20, 21?
I think so.
I think you're right, too. And maybe even Alentejo or other places. All right. Good job. Good job. I give you a B+, all right? The reason I don't give you an A is because you cheated on the questions before. And when you do that, you should get an A. That's okay. But on pure effort and great answers, you get the B+, all right? All right, we got to wrap up, Shana. Okay. It was a pleasure to talk to you. Let me do a quick wrap up and get some info from you. So if you have a question, suggestion, wine happening, or event, hit me up at sam@thegrapenation.com. That's sam@thegrapenation.com. Subscribe to the Grape Nation podcast on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or wherever you get your pods. Leave a review if you like the podcast, and think about subscribing. If you want the show delivered to you weekly without searching around for it, just hit the subscribe button. No brainer. Follow us on Instagram at @SBenRuby, on Twitter @BenRuby. I know it's a little confusing, but you can get to us through our hashtag, The Grape Nation. On Facebook, we are The Grape Nation. We will post Shana's wine list, her wine list selections on our social media sites in the coming week. All right, so Shana, if people want to get the book,
yes,
where are the best and obvious places to get them?
Bookshop.org, and they will.
Now let's talk about that for a second. Bookshop.org is a site kind of a clearinghouse for smaller booksellers, or how does that work?
Bookshop.org works with local bookstores.
Okay.
So you can order it and then pick it up or have it sent from your local bookstore. So it supports the local guys. You can also order it on barnesandnoble.com. There is Amazon if you so choose.
Okay.
But it's out there in the world.
I don't know if you know the answer to this or not. I don't. But what's it called? Bookseller.org or .com? The first one.
Oh, bookshop.org.
Bookshop.org.
Mm-hmm.
Do they have pretty heavy participation? Like, did you find like Wise and Strand and this guy in New York not on it, or pretty much everyone?
I think
it seems pretty well.
I've ordered from there and I've picked up stuff at McNally Jackson, so I know that they're pretty.
So they have.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I want to hear. All right, so all the usual places in a good way.
Yep.
Like we love to talk about small winemakers and families and people that put their soul into it. We want you to go support that bookseller that went out of their way to get it. But if you can't, you know where to go. If we want to follow you on social media, do you post?
I do post at Shana Speaks Wine. That's on Instagram.
Shana
Yep.
Speaks Wine.
Yep.
That's your Instagram account. Anywhere else?
Twitter. Well, Twitter.
Instagram's your main gig, right?
Correct.
Twitter.
Yes. Ish.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't use Facebook that much, so Instagram is probably the. Maybe this year we'll get on TikTok. We'll see. Maybe not. Not sure how I feel about that.
All right. Do whatever you want. Like I said, we're going to post. Feel free to post, repost. All right, Shana, we got to wrap it up. Thank you to our guest, Shana Clarke. Shana's new book. We just told you where to get it. Go out and get it. It's how do I say this without sounding silly? I was going to say it's a fun read, but that's not. It's a very cool read. I think it's a book to have on your shelf for your arsenal. I think if you're into wine and you want to know more about places and you need a reference, it's good to have that. I think there's a lot of reasons why you should own it. So go out and buy it. So thank you to Shana. Thank you, as always, to our engineer, Armin, at the board, and everyone at the Heritage Radio Network. I'm Sam Ben-Ruby, and you've been listening to The Grape Nation. The Grape Nation is powered by Simplecast. Thanks for listening to Heritage Radio Network, food radio supported by you. Keep in touch at heritageradionetwork.org/subscribe.